The Anatomy of Silence, Shadow of Golden, the Heart of Manhattan. In this cathedral of glass and steel, Harvey's office was like the heart that kept Hollywood beating. The Oscar statues adorning the walls shone with a golden glow, while the carpet on the floor was so thick that footsteps were muffled, as if even the presence of a human being could be dissolved here. The view of Manhattan through the windows was the geographical projection of the intoxication of power and authority. Sarah Brennan, 26 years old, was nervously crumpling the corners of the script papers she held in her hands, trying to suppress the childlike excitement within her. Her screenplay, titled Lost Angels, was the result of 18 months of work dialogue, written at 2:30 in the morning. Scenes rewritten over morning coffee, an endless cycle of dreams, taking shape on paper. This screenplay was not just a story to her, it was a mosaic of pieces of her own soul. A call from Beverly Hills had summoned him to this temple. "Weinstein wants to meet you," they had said. That name was like the name of a sorcerer in Hollywood, someone who could turn everything he touched into gold, but also someone who could raise what he burned from the ashes. As the secretary ushered her in, Sarah's stomach clenched. Maybe it was just excitement, but her instincts whispered something else. Harvey sat behind his desk like a great sultan, sizing her up. He smiled, but that smile was unsettling, like insects crawling beneath Sarah's skin. "Your script is quite impressive," Harvey said, spreading the papers across the desk. Every word was weighted, as if the words coming out of his mouth were gold coins. "But in Hollywood, talent isn't enough, my dear. Here, you have to learn the rules of the game." Sarah's vocal cords trembled. An alarm was ringing inside her, but she couldn't yet understand what it meant. What do you mean?" Harvey stood up from his chair. His body loomed over Sarah like a giant. He walked to the door and turned the key. The metallic click was the line that divided Sarah's world before and after. "You're a very smart girl," Harvey said, his voice dripping with a sticky double meaning. "You'll understand these things." The impossibility of 4GTNG. When Sarah returned home that night, she couldn't look at herself in the mirror. Her body no longer felt like her. On it was borrowed, defiled, broken. She stepped into the shower, turned the water on full blast, but couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't clean. As the soap suds washed away, the stain inside her seemed to sink deeper. The script was still lying on the table. Those beautiful, hopeful pages now seemed like traitorous witnesses. She reached out and touched the paper. Her trembling fingers blurred the words. "This stays between us," Harvey had said, clinging to Sarah's shoulder, "or you'll never work in this business again. Do you understand me? Never again." Silence enveloped Sarah like a spider's web. Who could she tell? Her mother lived in a small town in Ohio. How could she understand the realities of Hollywood? She had friends, but they were all living the same dream, trapped in the same golden cage. They all feared Harvey's power, they all dreaded his wrath. Sleep wouldn't come. When she closed her eyes, Harvey's face appeared that sticky smile, that possessive look. Sarah felt dirty, but also very alone. It was as if she was carrying the biggest secret in the world, and that secret was burning her from the inside out. Days passed. The script lay on the desk, untouched, as if cursed. Sarah tried to write, but her fingers froze on the keyboard. The words no longer obeyed her. It was as if her tongue was under Harvey's control. The shadows of Otiachara. Sarah was not alone, but she did not know it yet. Emma Rodriguez was a young actress of 20. She had come from a small town in Southern California, where her mother had supported her by working at a sewing machine. Emma's dream was simple: to act in beautiful stories, to make people laugh or cry, to touch them. When she started working at Miramax, everything felt like a dream. Big productions, famous actors, bright lights. But Emma soon began to hear whispers in the hallways. Watch out for Harvey. Never be alone with him. If he calls you to his hotel room, find an excuse. These whispers were exchanged between women, very quietly, as if they were sacred secrets that must not be revealed. At first, Emma thought they were exaggerating. Harvey was a powerful man, perhaps a little rude, but he couldn't be that bad. Until that night. Emma had auditions for her first big movie. Harvey had invited her to dinner to talk about the role, he had said. But instead of a restaurant, he had called her to his hotel room. Come, sit down, Harvey said, pointing to the edge of the bed. Emma chose the chair. I'm watching you, Emma. You're very talented, but talent is 20% of this business. The rest. The rest is about making connections. Emma's breath quickened. The air in the room grew heavy, as if the oxygen was being sucked out. Harvey stood up and approached her. This is a big opportunity for you, he said, sitting down next to Emma. But opportunities come with a price. Do you understand? Emma's body tensed up. She tried to escape, but Harvey was stronger. That night, Emma's innocence was shattered, not just physically, but her belief in the world as well. The next day, when Emma went to work, no one could look her in the eye. It was as if what had happened was written on their foreheads. But no one spoke. Everyone knew, but everyone remained silent. When Emma returned home that night, she took a notebook. She wrote everything down: the date, the time, where they were, what Harvey said, her own feelings. She knew it would be useful one day. She knew she wasn't alone. Cracking WALL lesson, October 2017. With the first breath of autumn, a different wind was blowing through Hollywood. New York Times investigative journalists Jodi Kantor and Megan Twoh had been piecing together a puzzle for months. The clues they had were valuable but fragile, the stories of women who had been silenced for years. As a mother, Jodi felt the pain in these stories more deeply. Every woman she spoke to had the same tremor in her voice, a mix of fear, shame, anger, and helplessness. This isn't easy, each of them said, but I can't stay silent anymore. Sarah was now 3 years old. Years had passed, but the events of that night still haunted her. When the journalist called, Sarah had initially wanted to hang up, but Jodi's voice was different, not judgmental, but understanding. We just want to hear your story, Jodi had said. When you're ready, when you want to. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. No one had spoken to her like that in years. No one had given her a choice in years. Emma was ready to. She still kept the diary, the notebook she had written in over the years. The pages were yellowed and faded, but the words were still clear. Every word, every sentence, was a testament to the pain she had endured. Here's my proof, Emma said, placing the notebook on the table. Everything is here. The dates, the times, the words, the actions, everything. The fall of the MSK, October 5, 2017, was the day that divided history into before and after Harvey Weinstein. The New York Times headline shook the world. Harvey Weinstein paid off sexual harassment accusers for decades. Sarah read the news that morning while drinking her coffee. Her cup was shaking, but it wasn't out of fear, it was out of triumph. She felt like the burden she had been carrying for years had been shared. She realized she wasn't alone. Panic was spreading in Hollywood. Harvey's so-called friends began to flee one by one. Company partners were holding emergency meetings, trying to distance themselves. Harvey's phone calls went unanswered. Rose McGowan, Gwyneth Paltrow, Ashley Judd. Famous names began to speak out one after another. Each story emboldened the next. The wall of silence was cracking, and the truth was coming to light. The #MeToo movement was born. The wave that began with Alyssa Milano's tweet encompassed millions of women. Sarah also wrote, "Me too." 2 words, but a truth she hadn't dared to say for years. Harvey's power was crumbling like a sandcastle. The man who was the king of Hollywood just yesterday was now being pushed out of society. "This is a conspiracy," he shouted at his lawyers. But no one was listening to him anymore. The slow breath of J.U.S. Dicey, February 24, 2020. Manhattan Criminal Court. A historic trial was beginning. Harvey Weinstein was on trial for sexual assault and rape charges. The courtroom was packed, journalists, activists, victims, and those supporting them. Sarah was on the witness stand. She was finally telling the world the truth she had kept silent for years. Her voice was strong and determined. She looked at Harvey. The once powerful man now appeared small, old, and helpless. "What I experienced in that room that day changed my life forever," Sarah said. There was no tremor in her voice anymore. "But by speaking here today, I am able to leave that night behind me." Emma also spoke. She read from her diary, recounting every detail. The courtroom fell silent. The jury members listened intently, not blinking. February 11, 2020, the day of the verdict. The jury foreman stood up. "The defendant, Harvey Weinstein, is found guilty of first-degree sexual assault and third-degree rape. Harvey's face turned pale. He dropped the cane he was holding. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison. Sarah was crying as she left the courtroom. But this time, her tears were not of pain, but of relief. The Journey, CIONTOIN, US in April 2024, an unexpected piece of news arrived. The New York Court of Appeals had overturned Harvey's conviction. He would be retried on procedural grounds. When Sarah heard the news, the old fear returned. But this time, it was different. She wasn't alone. There was an army around her, women fighting the same fight. "Justice sometimes moves slowly," Sarah said in an interview. "Sometimes it seems to take a step back. But it always comes in the end. Our story proves it." In June 2025, Harvey was found guilty again in a new trial. This time, there was certainty. The appeals process had been exhausted. As Emma left the courtroom, she looked at the young women. "No one is alone anymore," she said. "We are all together. We are all strong." Mette Moore Patosia Sarah is now approaching 40. Her screenplays are Oscar-nominated. Her books are bestsellers. But most importantly, she can finally hear her own voice. In her study, there is a photo on the wall, the first New York Times article from 2017. Next to it is the first page of her new screenplay, The Anatomy of Silence. One day, her granddaughter visited her. The little girl asked her grandmother, "Why is this case so important?" Sarah smiled and replied, "Because, sweetheart, true justice requires courage, and we learned to be brave. You will too." Emma was now an activist. She supported women fighting sexual harassment and empowered them. She always said the same thing in her speeches: "Silence is loneliness. But when we speak together, our voices are as powerful as thunder." The birth of a new WOROD Hollywood had changed. The #MeToo movement had transformed not just an industry, but the entire world. The balance of power had shifted, and women were now writing their own stories. Sarah was now an old woman. She looked out her window at Manhattan. The old Miramax building was still there, but it no longer held fear only hope. A new generation of producers, directors, and writers walked those corridors. but by different rules. The Harvey Weinstein case paved the way for millions of women to be liberated. The walls of silence had been broken, and the truth had come out. As the sun set, Sarah sat down at her desk. She was going to write a new story, a story full of hope, strength, and freedom. Because now, words were free too. And this was not just an end, but a sign of a new beginning. The Anatomy of Silence is inspired by the true events of the Harvey Weinstein case and is dedicated to the courage and solidarity of all victims. This story tells of how silence was broken, power was questioned, and justice became possible.